Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Conference Host Committee Co-Chair and Executive Vice President of the Leichtag Foundation, Charlene Seidle.
Good morning, everybody. So, is everybody exhausted from their farm experience last night? How was it at Coastal Roots Farm? Woohoo! We so enjoyed hosting you. It was such a pleasure. Welcome to our Monday morning plenary and to day 2 of the Jewish Funders Network International Conference. A few people were telling me last night that they think every conference should be in San Diego, and we're up for that if you are. We're so happy that this was the best attended, most oversubscribed, most wonderful conference here in our home city. We were so glad, as I said, for everybody who joined us at the Leichtag Commons. A lot of people have asked me to just say 2 sentences more about what the Commons is, which I'll do. It's a 67.5-acre agricultural property which houses a educational farm, a Jewish community farm, Coastal Roots Farm. Many of you took tours of the farm last night. Provides all the food to the charitable food system, and we celebrate all the Jewish agricultural traditions on the farm, as well as a co-working space, the North County Hub, which houses 26 organizations, including the international headquarters of Moishe House and many other organizations. We look at Leichtag Commons as a nexus for Jewish life, sustainability, environmental stewardship, agriculture, all the people that the community is wringing their hands over, we feel we're able to attract through different and creative pathways to Jewish expression in life. And really, the space is great, but it's the people there that animate the space. You all being there last night was the greatest gift you could have given us, because it really has inspired us and led to so much creativity. So thank you. In a moment, I'll be introducing Jake Porway, our plenary speaker. After he speaks, we'll hear a response from Lisa Eisen to discuss how Jake's concepts can apply specifically to Jewish philanthropy. Following Lisa's response, Lisa and Jake will speak together. And after that, we'll be presenting this year's J.J. Greenberg Memorial Award, which is a very, very special year. It's the 13th year that this will be presented. So let's get our plenary started by introducing this morning's speakers. Our respondent and my good friend and colleague, Lisa Eisen, is Vice President of the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Foundation and Director of its Washington, D.C. office. Lisa spearheads initiatives that empower young Jews to embrace the joy of Judaism, build inclusive Jewish communities, support the State of Israel, and repair the world. Lisa was the founding board chair of Repair the World, the Israel on Campus Coalition, and the iCenter. And she also serves on the boards of Olam, the Israel Institute, BBYO, and Project Interchange seminars in Israel. So this is a very busy lady, but somehow she still finds the time to mentor the rest of us in the field, and I've been a very grateful recipient of that. So we're really looking forward to hearing you, Lisa. Our plenary speaker today, Jake Porway, the king of data, I just called him. I'm not sure if he liked that, but that's what his bio looks like to me. He uses big data to tackle big social problems. As the founder of DataKind, Jake acts as a bridge between data scientists and nonprofits, which often don't have the know-how or the resources to benefit from data analysis. A former New York Times data scientist, he wants all of humanity to benefit from the gains of big data. Jake was named a 2012 National Geographic Emerging Explorer. Wow, that's so cool. And he currently hosts the Numbers Game on the National Geographic Channel, in which he tackles one of life's most daunting topics each episode, such as how to live longer, combating road rage, the best negotiation methods, and reveals the surprising science behind them. Irrepressibly curious, Jake is both a scientist and a coder, equally excited to pioneer the next machine learning algorithm as he is to optimize the code to run it. Jake hopes to make machines smarter, and he looks for new ways to help machines make sense of things for the greater good. So please join me in welcoming the 2012 National Geographic Emerging Explorer, Jake Porway.
Oh, thank you, everyone. I should never have let my mom write my intro. It's very awkward. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here at the Jewish Funders Network speaking with you all. And if we could pop those slides right up on this big slide here, that would be awesome. And while it's getting set up, I want to say that I feel a little awkward because there's nothing particularly Jewish about my presentation, except that I'm very anxious to give it. But I am hoping over the next 20 minutes to give you a sort of potpourri and banquet of some of the work that we're doing at DataKind using big data and sort of entertain some ideas that we've been thinking about that might spark the conversation for the panel. Now, while we're working on getting these slides up, I'm wondering if someone could help me with a little exercise here. I'd actually like you guys to do this. Just close your eyes and picture data. Yeah, that's right. Just let it wash over you, that picture of big data. Now open your eyes, and I want to hear, what did you picture? Say it again? A mess. Numbers, yeah? Zeros and ones, exactly. This is exactly what people think of when they think of data, is these spreadsheets and this mess, or like something out of the Matrix, you know, like we're just all reading binary. And I'm going to say, there it is, perfect. Yes, exactly. Spreadsheets. Thank you. Who? Computers, right? Mess, or the horrible anonymous binary tunnel, right? In fact, there's actually a website called Big Data Explained that just shows pictures of big data from marketing. Look at this. How unhelpful is this? There's a guy in a boat lost in the binary sea. Why did he wear a suit in a boat? He has bigger problems than big data. Like, this doesn't connect you to data. In fact, all this can agree upon is that apparently big data is blue. That's great. The thing is, it's really sad that this is how people think of data because it is so much more personal, so much more embedded in our communities and our lives than we realize. And all it really takes to realize that is to go back to a time before big data, to go way back into the annals of human history, all the way back to the year 2000, when this is what it looked like to rent a movie. Do you remember this? Oh my God, this was horrible. You had no idea what was good or bad. You didn't know what you were going to like or not. It was a depressing and crushing time for humanity. It's awful, but thankfully now we live in 2016 where with the click of a button, I get a customized menu of movies I'm going to like. I can make better decisions about how I'm going to spend my Friday or Saturday night, and I am a happier human overall. And this is really all because of data, the millions of data points that Netflix is collecting about people to understand our likes and our preferences. And this to me really hints at the age that we are in, that we are actually facing this revolutionary time where there are now more cell phones on the planet than people. Almost everything we do online now is digitized and tracked, as some people know better than others. And we're now starting to instrument our bodies so that we can measure everything from our heartbeats to what tugs at our heartstrings and surrounding our globe in sensors and satellites, measuring everything we are doing. So this data that we talk about is not just spreadsheets and servers and binary. It is nothing less than a new age of reason. And with that excitement, you think, man, what could we do about all that data that could teach us more about ourselves, about our world, about our relationship to each other? And so far, we've gotten so good as a species in using this cutting-edge data and technology to sell people stuff. Don't get me wrong, this is my Amazon page. I love my Snuggie. It's great. I'm glad Amazon knew I would. But this is where I see 99% of this work going. Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and that's fine, but there's got to be something more we could do, for social change with this new revolution. So I set out to answer, how could we do that? How can we use data for the greater good? And I started with the people I knew best, data scientists. I'm a data scientist myself. And one of the things I love about data scientists is we're an enthusiastic bunch. We'll work on data 9 to 5 or on weekends. How many people here know what a hackathon is? Oh man, I love seeing that number go up, fantastic. So for the uninitiated, hackathon is basically a 24-hour, 48-hour jam session where a bunch of coders and technologists get together to see what cool stuff they can build. And I remember going to my first hackathon and thinking, this is incredible. I'm sitting next to a machine learning expert from Google, some expert scientists from NASA. This is how we're going to make change. I can't wait to see what we come up with. It's going to be so world-changing. It's going to have so much impact. It is going to be so important. And in just 48 hours, we came up with so many things that were so unfulfilling. This is an app to park your car. Someone else made an app that finds local deals with machine intelligence. It's fine, but it's more of the same. Because if you give a technologist a problem and say, hey, solve a problem, they're going to solve their own, which is usually finding cheap beer, not low-income housing. The good thing, though, is I thought, okay, it's not the data scientists. The cool thing is social organizations are now a part of this movement, too. To me, that big and big data means expansive. And so now you see groups you don't think of as tech companies suddenly surrounded with data. There's a small group in Africa called Kalimo Salama, and they give loans to farmers via cell phone. It's great. They can reach more farmers that way. But what it means is they now have data pouring off those cell phones about what every farmer asks for and when. And with that, they can actually start to predict what farmers are going to need before they need it, so they can provide them services in advance. And that's incredible, because now you think, wow, it's not just tech companies. Everyone, including social organizations, can take advantage of the same algorithms that Silicon Valley is using to boost profits to instead boost impact. And that's so empowering until you realize they have no one to help them do that. Data scientists are super expensive, super rare, and even if you had one, what would you do with it? You know, how do you even talk about machine learning over coffee? That's hard. So there's a really big gap there. So that's exactly why we founded DataKind, to fill that gap, to help bridge this gap between data scientists who want to do good and give back pro bono with social organizations who could use this incredible wealth of data, not spreadsheets, but all digital data, to have more impact. And that way we hope that data scientists get a chance to have positive impact, social organizations get a chance to maximize impact, and in the process, we all get to live in a better world. So let me show you a few examples of what this looks like. First comes from a group in New York called Crisis Text Line. Now, Crisis Text Line is like those old crisis counseling call lines where people would call when they were in need. But as many of us know, these days teens don't use phones, they text. So Crisis Text Line allows you to connect to a counselor when you're in need. But Crisis Text Line had a problem. The system works great. It's been replicated in hundreds of cities, but they have a problem with something called repeat texters. And a repeat texter is someone who just keeps texting the service without a crisis. They just want to know their office hours or something like that. And it's a small portion of people who do it, but they have to treat each text seriously, so it chews up all their resources. All these counselors get bogged down. So they said, how can we better understand when someone's going to be a repeat texter? So we teamed them up with this data scientist from Pivotal Labs, Noel Sio, and that's Bob Philbin from Crisis Text Line's data team. And they found that with using computers and algorithms, they could build a model that allowed them to know who was going to be a repeat texter after just 4 texts. And the takeaway from this like boring data-y looking graph is Crisis Text Line used to wait 16 texts. Now they can do it with 4 texts because the computers automatically identify, hey, this person doesn't need to go to a counselor. And now they can serve 10,000 more teens every year with the same resources that they had before. It's incredible. So they're able to use their own data with machine intelligence to become more effective. Another example I really like comes from the New York City Parks Department, a government agency that looks out for the urban forest in New York, which I think is the coolest name they have for New York's trees. And they have data about every single tree, when it was planted, when it went down, how it was maintained, et cetera. And they said, you know, what do we do? How can we learn from this data? In particular, we do this one program where we go out and we prune tree limbs. You got a tree limb hanging, you don't want it to fall on someone's car or grandpa. So we cut them down. But we actually don't know if that's effective or not. And could we test that? So we teamed them up with this guy, Brian D'Alessandro. And in his day job, he's a data scientist who answers the question, if he shows you an ad next to your email, are you more or less likely to buy the thing he showed you or not? He uses a lot of fancy math and algorithms to do that. You can use the same fancy math and algorithms to answer, if you prune these trees, do you get safer blocks or not? And so his team came up with a number of things, one of which is this beautiful visualization that you can navigate New York's tree system with and see where they're all planted. But more importantly than that, they came up with a number, 22%. There are 22% fewer tree emergencies on the blocks where they were pruning these trees than not. And this was incredible because no one had seen this before. And cities all across the US started writing to New York and saying, hey, we've got this data too. How can we use that? How can we use that same algorithm to test our effectiveness? So I love that because it not only shows that there's ways to actually test what you're doing with this glut of data, but it's not just nonprofits. Governments are getting involved in this too. And lastly, I'll talk about a quick project we do with Give Directly. Now, Give Directly gives cash transfers directly to the poor. I can donate $100 directly to a poor person in Kenya or Uganda. And again, a pretty popular program. It's doing pretty well. But they wanted to expand. And to expand, they had to know where are the poorest villages in Kenya and Uganda. We don't really have a good measure of the poverty levels. Now, Give Directly had a pretty ingenious way of measuring poverty. They found that if you look at the roof types of structures in a village, you can kind of get an estimate for poverty. You know, if you've got a thatched roof, you're much poorer than someone who has an iron roof. In fact, for comparison, that iron roof house is like the wealthiest individual in that town. That's like millionaire status. So it's a very strong indicator. Problem is they got to send people out all over the country on foot to go, okay, yeah, thatched roof, iron roof, look around. It takes a long time. It's very exhaustive. So we had a couple of scientists come in from IBM and said, hey, you could probably see the same information in Google Maps images. And lo and behold, Google Maps, you can just go look this up right now, zoom in on Kenya and Uganda, and on the left-hand side, you can see some brown rectangles that are thatched roofs. The right side, that little silver thing, is an iron roof. What that means is you can then write a program that just goes through and reads all these images, and if you don't read like predator vision, what this is basically doing is, on the bottom right, I'm putting little red dots on all the houses, saying I found this, it's a thatched roof, this is an iron roof. And that allows you to build one of these poverty maps, or roofiness maps, in just 2 hours. You have to send anybody out, and you could update this right now. Just click a button. That's incredible. It's not even data that GiveDirectly had. It's data that's just floating out there that if you have the know-how to make sense of, can totally improve your operations. And I gave this one because I was like, I don't know, should I put this in my talk today? Because it's kind of like sci-fi, and everyone's like, yes, satellite imagery, that sounds strange. And then I was reading before I went to bed, and this was in the New York Times. Satellite images can pinpoint poverty where surveys can't, and they just go through an extensive list of all of the nonprofits and organizations that are taking advantage of this technology right now, today. So we're there. I think that's super exciting. And the thing that's really exciting to me is, like, I could go on about all these projects like a proud grandpa, but the thing that's great is what we see out of these projects is not just the impact of the results, but the relationships that are built. Having data scientists sit down next to social organizations and collaborate together has allowed social organizations to hire some of those volunteers, to go back to their funders to say, oh, this is what we need, not just a big data bucket of money, but we need this project, we need to think about data this way. So we're seeing this kind of unintentional but wonderful rise of data literacy in doing this work. So DataKind, a little data on DataKind. We've been around about 4 years, and in that time we've done 60 projects. We've got about 12,000 volunteer data scientists across our network that team up with people. And we have 6 international chapters, which has been exciting to see volunteers taking up our work from Singapore to Bangalore, UK, Dublin, San Francisco, DC, and in New York to figure out how do I build a data illiterate community in my own city. So we could kind of just stop here. I mean, that's sort of the point that I'm excited about is, hey, yeah, like there's a new opportunity. Here's some examples of projects done and done. But I think there's sort of some interesting ideas if you dig a little below the surface that I want to just share to kind of cue up conversation for our panel discussion. The first is that it can be really tempting to hear this and go, oh, that's great. DataKind's data science for nonprofits. Give me some data scientists, magic happens. Unfortunately, that's really not how it works. And anyone who's done design probably realizes the folly of just bringing in like consultants to solve a problem. What we found, though, is that there are these sort of 6 components that pop up in every successful data for social good project. And the 6 components that we see are that we need to have, starting from the top left there and going around, a really clear problem statement, right? Not just I want to reduce poverty, I want to reduce poverty for these people by 10% by this date. Clear enough. You also need data, of course, but here we're learning that data no longer means what you go out and collect or survey, but digital data, images, video, anything that could be out there. Of course, we've referred to the data scientists. You need some plucky nerds. I mentioned funding, but not just for dollars. You need funders in this process because funders also often have perspective on what is going on out there. They need to have a seat at the table and talk about what is needed. And that brings us to people like subject matter experts. And here we're really thinking about people who can refer to say, if we're going to build something like that crisis text line algorithm, how do other teen counseling groups need that? What about teen advocates? Is this dangerous in some way? How else could we make it better for the broader population? Let's talk to teens who have actually needed crisis counseling. So how do we bring stakeholders to the table that aren't just the nonprofit themselves? And then, of course, we need social actors. Someone who is actually going to say, I'm going to make a change based on this algorithm, and this is how it's going to work, and I'm committed to that. And this might sound obvious kind of at a high level, but we see right now too often people wrestling with data by saying, I just need the data. Well, let's start with the question. Or I just need the technologist. Like, well, they don't know the problem. You need social actors too. So really, DataKind, in the office, we do very little data science. We spend all our time just bringing these people to the table and translating between them. So that's really part of the work I love most. And so as you think about going on your own data science journey, think about, do I have the kind of committee that could really make this really successful? Because a lot of this could live within your organization already. And sometimes it may have to go elsewhere. So that's one thing. There's sort of the 6 components, not just data scientists, mix, and magic. The other thing is I know a lot of people may be saying, OK, cool, this was kind of a fun talk in the morning, but like, yeah, big data, I got other issues. I'm going to just ignore this for now. It's probably not a big deal. I don't need to worry about it. A friend of mine had a great quote I loved. It said, big data will soon seem quaint. Oh, what a lovely notion when we thought that all this cell phone data and satellite imagery was big data, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. As I alluded to before, we're instrumenting everything. To the point that soon there's going to know, how many butts are in these chairs in real time. Like that's coming. So how do we engage with that? And I'm reminded, I always think of this guy as the exemplar of like big data is here and quaint. It's a guy named Mike Snyder, and he's the head of bioinformatics at Stanford. And he was really frustrated by the fact that when you go to the doctor, you get a blood test, and you get about 10 numbers, right? Glucose, cholesterol, things like that. It's not a lot of information. It's kind of like, like surveys. We just get one number back per year. So he said, forget that. I'm going to draw my blood once an hour, and I'm going to measure 10,000 variables every time. I've got grad students. Whatever, I can do this. So he starts measuring his blood. They start analyzing it. They see things no one has ever seen. They see how his blood levels change when he eats something down to the microbial level or the cellular level. They see how his epigenetics change as he gets sick. And weirdly, after he has a respiratory infection, he starts to show signs of early onset type 2 diabetes. He's like, this is crazy. I have none of the family history. I have none of the signs. But I better check this out. So he goes to his doctor and he says, hey, doc, I need you to test me for type 2 diabetes. Doctor says, Mike, you're crazy. You have none of the symptoms. You don't have any family history. Mike's like, trust me, I do weird stuff at home. Just try it, please. Just do it. Sure enough, he's got type 2 diabetes. But he has caught it so phenomenally early in advance because of this data that he can actually reverse the effects. He totally cuts it off with diet and exercise. Now, this is kind of exciting from a medical perspective because this is here. The White House just launched a precision medicine initiative. Like, we're getting to this big data health age. But I think there are analogies here for how we think about where we're going in the future, even in the social sector. So instead of the equivalent of the blood panel of going out to communities and saying, hey, answer 10 questions about how connected you are in your community, where are the other sources of that? Could we actually just be monitoring LinkedIn and looking at how people are connecting to each other and just learn that? These opportunities are around us, and right now I'm thinking of LinkedIn. 5 years from now, who knows? There would probably be our phones measuring every single person that we just were around in this room. So aside from this just being a cool story, my sort of call is get started thinking about it now, because it's not only not going away, this is going to skyrocket. So how do we start thinking about big data for our own work? And lastly, this has been such a positive talk. It'd be easy to just go like, yeah, big data helps everything. But of course, it's really important to think about the ethics of what we're doing here. And there's a line that I love. This is from Marshall McLuhan. We become what we behold. We shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. Meaning, of course, that we first designed to solve a problem, but then the way we think about problems is dictated by the tools we have. And what could be more impression building, I guess? What could have more influence than algorithms, invisible little decision makers that we're putting in the world? And so I think of this case from Microsoft, where they had this patent to avoid crime-ridden neighborhoods. I love that. If I go to a new city and I get directions, I don't want to be taken through a dangerous area. That's really dangerous. However, what this probably could create, an unintended consequence could be that affluent, mostly white people with cell phones may avoid sort of traditionally low income, probably minority areas with high crime. Is that good? Is that bad? I'm not even making a value judgment, but it's probably something that's going to happen. And so who's responsible for that? Is it Microsoft? Is it the poor data scientist who's just doing what his boss told him to build these directions? Is it us? Is it the government? It's a question that's open. And the more we start to bring these algorithms away from just figuring out how to get people to buy stuff, these questions are going to become way more important. We built an algorithm for Amnesty International. They said, we have all these human rights violations that come in every day. We don't know which ones are most urgent. We need to prioritize our resources. Can you have a computer help us figure that out? And the algorithm was easy to write. Took 1 day of a bunch of volunteers working on it, and boom, now it sorts, hey, you got to focus on these first. They're the violations that are most likely to result in someone getting killed. But then we have the question, what if we're wrong? What if they're wrong? What if we haven't thought of something? How is Amnesty International going to know exactly how this is going to be used? How will they know that the parameters are off? So there's a really big question, I think, in my mind about how we share that responsibility. There's no easy answer. We'll go into depth in it in the panel discussion, but it's definitely a question that needs to be asked because we're doing this. So let's figure it out. Okay, so with that, that's sort of my overview of a bunch of ideas. You may be saying, okay, great, but bring it down to earth. What the heck am I supposed to do with this tomorrow? So I know Lisa's going to talk about this a lot more in specific, but I just want to give a few plugs. The first is just to start by listening to more talks like this. Understand the potential of data. Maybe everyone in this room already does, but I know the world out there doesn't. So please share the word that data is not just about reporting. It is for predicting the future. That's pretty cool. So the other thing is there are lots of meetups and internet groups talking about this. Just get in the bath. Just start thinking about it. If you really want to commit more, roll up your sleeves. There are actually community events, like those hackathons, where you can drop in. You don't have to be a technologist. We at DataKind run these all the time, so if you're near one of our cities, just come by and see what people are actually doing. It's really empowering. Now, of course, if you really want to get going, you can train your staff. You may have people who are in IT who have a lot of these skills already who just need a few courses. There are now online courses like Coursera.com, data science fellowships. This stuff's blowing up. There are more opportunities than ever to get trained on this. And the last thing I would say is if you're a funder, fund this as innovation, like fund this work. It's not overhead. It's not just reporting. It really is like technological innovation, and it takes a lot of resources. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the salaries of Twitter employees, but it's hard. It's really hard to do, and it's going to require funders getting on board and saying, yeah, I'm willing to try this, and it's probably going to screw up at first. So those are some of the many ways you can get started. And if you're really dying for just like one takeaway, I always show this site that I like called datavisualization.ch. It's a list of tools you can use to start doing data visualization now. You can download them all for free and get going. If you really just want to take that baby step, I think this site is a wonderful little place to start. So if you take nothing else from this talk, the thing that I hope you walk away with is that data is not just the blue tunnel. It's not just the spreadsheet. However you go on your own data journey from here, I hope what really is impressed is that this is a fundamentally new time for humanity. And I found that it's really well expressed by this guy, Joel de Rosnay, in 1979. He wrote this book called The Macroscope. And he said, you know, humans have always built technologies to understand the unknown. So in the old days, we built the telescope. It allowed us to see the infinitely great and far away, the cosmos and the planets. We understood our place in the universe so much better. And then we invented the microscope. And this allowed us to see the infinitely small little microbes and bacteria that allowed us to make huge leaps and advances in medicine and health. But what we need now is like a macroscope, something that will let us see the infinitely complex, the patterns of society and nature that are unobservable and uninterrogable to the human eye. And in '79, Joel could only dream, but today, this to me is the promise of data. Because I can't just see 9 billion credit card transactions flying through the air. I can't see the way people are communicating with each other in communities around the world. But with data, as we've now instrumented our world, we can. This is a new opportunity to see ourselves and our world in ways that we never have before. And that's so exciting to me because that means whether you are a data scientist, a technologist who does this as a full-time job, or someone who's in a social organization who knows a problem that needs to be solved, or a funder who understands the space, we are all a part of this movement. And that is exciting because it means we can all come together, we can all start thinking about using data for the greater good, and it's when we are all working together in a community on this that we can go beyond just using data to make better decisions about what kind of movies we want to see, and we can start using data to make better decisions about what kind of a world we want to see. Thank you very much.
Jake, that was awesome. I think I finally found somebody who's more excited about his work than I am. I didn't think it was possible. So we just heard Jake give an inspiring talk about the promise of data science. Now, my job as clearly a non-data scientist and someone in your seat is to expand on that inspiration and take away the intimidation. My job is to help make this relevant and actionable for each of us and for the field of Jewish philanthropy. As funders, we're used to having a bird's eye view, and big data can help us have that. As my friend Darren McKeever, who I think is here from the Davidson Foundation, notes, it's less about big data and more about big wisdom. It's about using data for better knowledge about the challenges we face, the solutions we're using, and the progress we're making. Data in and of itself may seem dry and geeky, maybe even scary, but combined with human insight, it can become data art. So I want to talk to you about 3 things. 1, how and why this matters to us as funders. 2, how we can use this to help our grantees. And 3, what this means for the Jewish world. So before I do, let's have a moment of honest reflection here. Raise your hand if you are freaked out by the thought of big data. Freaked out, intimidated, scared. Raise your hand if you're freaked out by the thought of small data even. Well, let me tell you, that was me. When the term big data first started circulating, I really thought it was only for people like Jake. I had no clue, why is this relevant to me? Why is this relevant to my work? But then I came to realize its importance. And the best way I can explain it is this. In a time when Jewish life has to compete in the marketplace of ideas, our offerings have to be more attractive. They have to be more compelling, more cutting edge, and above all, more relevant. Today, that means fully embracing technology. It means harnessing the power of data for the insight we need to make smarter decisions, to accelerate our progress, and to show the way forward. So one of my goals today, and Jake already said it, is to urge you, get started. At Schusterman, all it took for us to get started was hiring an experienced consultant. He took us off of a collection of Excel spreadsheets and onto a powerful Salesforce database that now undergirds all of our work. And what if you've already gotten started? I encourage you, please take it to the next level. And that leads me to a few words about what the next level might be. There's big data, and there's small data, and this may surprise you, there's medium data. The best definition I've heard of big data is whatever amount it takes to give you new and actionable insights. Meanwhile, our grantees are primarily collecting small data. So that means that as funders and grant makers, we sit in the middle. Our role is to aggregate what Jacob Harold, the CEO of GuideStar, calls medium data. Think of it as better structured information, organized storytelling. As funders, it's our responsibility to be the bridges to support medium data and the stepping stones to something larger. Whatever the size, we need more and better quality data. We need it, 1, for ourselves, 2, for our grantees, and 3, for the entire Jewish community. So let's break it down. 1, how is it relevant and useful to us as funders? For us at the Schusterman Foundation, we mostly use medium data. And here are 3 examples of how it helps us. Medium data helps us describe performance. I imagine, like many of you, we're collecting a lot more data than we used to about our work and our grantees. The information helps us to understand our reach and our impact. Medium data also helps predict what people want. We're collecting data from young adults in our network, and we'll be using predictive intelligence tools to match them with curated opportunities from our grantees tailored to their specific interests. We are, of course, taking care to ensure their privacy, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Medium data also helps us prescribe which choices will lead to our desired outcomes. For example, we've developed a survey called the Jewish Leadership Index, and it tracks information about how young Jews see themselves as Jewish leaders. Over time, we will have detailed information about what we need to do to support their journeys as Jewish leaders. So these are just a few of the ways that we use medium data. And this work, it all takes time. So whatever your size, whatever your focus, start collecting more data. Hire a tech consultant. Purchase a database. Make sure you are capturing quality data that can help you be more effective and more efficient. So if data is useful for us, it's doubly so for our grantees. They're the ones on the front lines gathering small data in real time. So how can we help them? We can fund technology infrastructure and expertise. And that can include support for tools like Salesforce, which, by the way, is free for nonprofits up to 10 licenses. We can fund training, as Jake mentioned, and we can pay for data scientists like Jake and DataKind to help our grantees ask the right questions and use data to find solutions. We can also incentivize more creative data use. And we can make bigger, better data a more central part of our planning and our evaluation. So we covered why this matters to us as grant makers and how it can help our grantees. Now that brings me to my third point. How can this help us as a field of Jewish philanthropy? Like many in the nonprofit sector, the Jewish community is lagging behind. But we don't have to be. It's in our power to harness data for the collective good of our community. As funders, we are uniquely positioned to effect sector-wide change. We can bridge across the work of multiple organizations and help them leverage data for our collective good. The bottom line, it's about sharing. It's about combining our data sets to be able to answer big questions and get fresh insights that can drive communal decisions. We can progress to big data and do some of those cool things that Jake talked about, but only if we share. Imagine, for example, if we could combine birthrights data sets and others which remain private with program evaluations and data sets from different organizations, maybe even with the Pew data. Imagine what we could learn about how to engage a generation and shape the Jewish future. What if the Jewish community was known for being collaborative and transparent, sharing our successes and our failures, and maybe even our data? So what can we do specifically to move towards such a future? We can provide data scientists to ongoing collective and field building efforts. We can help standardize questions so our grantees can share information in common ways. Most importantly, we can use our grant agreements. We can use them to ask that our grantees open source their data. We can require that they share all of their information with GuideStar and share their research on Creative Commons. In this way, we will help create bigger data for bigger wisdom. There's a great example of this happening right now. It's work being done by the Israel on Campus Coalition. They've been collecting enormous amounts of data about college campuses. They combine it with standardized data sets from all of their partner organizations. They share it through a community portal, replete with real-time access and updates on mobile app. And as the ICC director, Jacob Baim, said to me, data is driving collaboration, and collaboration is driving more data. The whole field is working more strategically, acting more rapidly, building trust and insight, and making a bigger impact on college campuses. In the end, data's true power is in its ability to tell a human story. If you remember the tech consultant I mentioned earlier, his name's Noah Austin, and he says the data is the story of individuals and the story of civilizations. It tells us what's going on with each of us, and it tells us what's going on with all of us. Data is one of the best storytellers out there. It's our modern-day parable. It reveals truths where we could not see them before. We could call it a Haggadah for the digital age, and that's an inspiring idea as we head into Passover. So in closing, what gets me up in the morning and what keeps me up at night is the drive for us to be more excellent and more relevant for our young people so the Jewish community can thrive today and survive tomorrow. I hope you all feel that drive too. I know that together we can become better equipped to meet the needs of today and secure a vibrant future for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. And data can help take us to that promised land. Thank you. So we're going to open it up for questions.
Yeah, we talked about this before, and we thought, you've heard us speak. You probably have a way better voice in this dialogue than just us. Oh, and an excited hand right there first.
I work in a media organization, so we have a lot of access to data through Google Analytics, fighting with a lot of organizations. And we're trying to do a lot of the things we talked about. And sometimes I ask myself, are we in a position where we know just enough to be dangerous? I see my staff really trying to dive into numbers and trying to create a narrative with the numbers, and it's great and it's a big shift. But sometimes I wonder, are we just totally wrong? We don't really know what we're doing. In terms of trying to wrestle with the numbers, and are we making something that we're just, they're journalists. We're not training, even the people who are doing the audience development, we're making snap decisions. Is it better, in your experience, to kind of build that discipline and go to do it, or risk making dumb mistakes?
Great question. For those who didn't hear it, basically, as this gentleman's media group embraces data, are we just doing enough to be dangerous and actually, like a bull in a china shop, or is this part of the progression? It's good to do. It's a great thorny question. I'm a little bit of two minds on it. So full disclosure, I'm a statistician myself, PhD in statistics. So in statistics, one of the best things that they teach you, aside from all the modeling and number stuff, is all around the ethics and the bias, and I've never met more skeptical people about data than statisticians. Everyone, oh, where did that come from? How did you draw that conclusion? So I tend to be of this mindset that, in fact, we do need some expertise, and there should be statisticians involved in the data work we're doing, especially when it has implications on human life. And actually, there's a really great story that maybe similar to just illustrate what you're talking about. I tell this story a lot about the stop and frisk data in New York. There was a stop and frisk program where police would stop people if they thought they were dangerous. They collected all that data and they made it publicly available. And so a local NPR affiliate basically took the data. They said, we don't know if this program is working. Is it actually getting guns off the street, or is it just intimidating people? The cops can now frisk people just at a whim. And so they built this map, a beautiful map that showed where all the stop and frisks were happening and where all the gun arrests were happening. And they said, look, these points they're not touching ... Does this thing really work? Probably not. But then another person took the same data and said, well, wait a second. If you change the coloring scheme, all of a sudden they look a little bit closer. And if you do this kind of modeling, then in fact they're right on top of each other. So it does work. And so the question is well, who's right? Who's wrong? It's kind of both of them and neither. Because what they did was use data to put a picture together that allowed people to draw conclusions. But it wasn't a rigorous statistical analysis that said, hey, this is provably an issue. I think that's the thing, is people still think that data and graphs are truth, but we need to start looking at them almost like we do at documentaries. There's someone behind that lens with a view. So that's my very curmudgeonly view. That said, there's no way to do that with just waiting around for statisticians. So I think we have to get comfortable bumping into things. I think people should be empowered to try with that in mind. So I say keep going at it, and you might scrape some knees and screw up, and I think that's what the world kind of needs to get to that next level.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I think we just have to look at data as one tool in our toolbox. We have lots of tools as funders. We can convene, we can give resources, we can give technical assistance. Data is just a tool, and what I meant by data art is it can never replace human insight. It can never replace human intuition. It's just one more piece of information that can help us get a new perspective, see it in a different way. And so I think if you get used to starting smaller also and collecting data and working with it and modeling in different ways and trying it, you experiment in the same way you might experiment with grants. Some of them are pilots, some of them work, some of them don't work. I think there are certain cases where there are ethics involved about the impact on human life. But we have to keep it in perspective that it's just one tool to add to our human decision-making process.
Well said. Any other questions from the audience? Great.
I have a question about how they collect the data, in that when you create all these great mapping tools and images, that you have to start from a set of data in the first place. And 1 out of every 5 people in America has a disability, and in the Jewish community we have more disabilities because we kept marrying each other for so long that we have genetic differences and we wait till we're older to marry, so we have a lot more disabilities than other. Yet when you look at the data, they never ask the question, or rarely ask the question about a disability status. They have race and gender and ethnic origin and all these other things. How do we get a question into the data sets that they're collecting in the first place?
Good question. I'm wondering if, I don't know that it relates to disability specifically, but when you did your project with the foundation, how did you maybe think about how the data was collected? Or the Salesforce database, for example, that this person built, where did that data come from?
Jennifer, I can't answer the specific question, but I think it's a really great point that we should be collecting data about that and all different kinds of information that will make our community more inclusive. We started by collecting data about, from our grantees about who they're serving and the number of people they're serving, where they are, who are the people who have the highest leadership potential in those cohorts. And then we've been expanding out from there, young adults who participate in our programs, and also people who are clicking on our website and reading articles on our social media. We're collecting data all the time that we try to use to make what we offer them more relevant and more curated to their specific interests. I mean, that's what they're used to doing. They go on Amazon and they, if you like this book, you should read this book. Everything is very tailored. Starbucks, exactly the kind of coffee you want. And we have to be able to provide that to, we primarily at Schusterman work with young Jews, teens, college students, young adults, and this is what they expect. I mean, technology is just like knife, fork, spoon for them. I mean, it is just part of who they are, and we have to give them the best that comes out of the information and the technology. So it's starting by collecting and then just getting more and more advanced at analyzing it and using it and getting outside help from people like Jake.
I think that question really speaks just as quickly to the need for collaboration. You're not going to get all the data at once, and the people collecting the data oftentimes aren't necessarily from the worlds that we're working in, so they may not know that. And I think what you kind of have to do is be a part of that conversation so you can look at that data and say, hey, why isn't disability in here? It's like, oh, of course, let's go back around and get back to it. I know it's kind of vague, but I would love to see data collection as more of a team sport for exactly that kind of challenge.
Can you? I'm sorry. I just wanted to see if Jake could. I think one of the things that is scary for people is sharing. We're very proprietary about our data, and I gave a message of how important it is that we start sharing and open sourcing, that we can learn from each other, that we can have bigger data that we can all look at together as a community. And I wonder if you can just give us an example or two about what that's looked like with the organizations you've worked with.
Yeah, sure. I think most people are a little bit worried about, of course, the privacy of the data they're sharing, as well you should be. These are your constituents. And also a little bit about competition, frankly. Let's name it. We're all often competing for the same funding. It can be hard to collaborate. But what we've seen is there are a few cases where people who start to open up that data realize that there's many things they can share that are not highly sensitive that actually provide a shared mission for both of them. GuideStar was invoked. I think you mentioned Jacob Harold. There's a project GuideStar did back in the day where they were looking at all of the 990 forms and saying, could we learn from this data, excuse me, which nonprofits are going to default this year, going to go bankrupt? And they looked at the financial data and it was kind of inconclusive. They're like, how could we get more data to inform this story, to get this picture out there? And they happen to know a group called Great Nonprofits, which is kind of like Yelp for nonprofits, right? People write reviews and such. And what they learned was that there are lots of service delivery organizations that don't really reflect their quality through their financials, but instead by people saying, hey, I stayed at this homeless shelter and it was terrible, don't ever go there, telling other homeless people, don't go. And what was amazing was they called Great Nonprofits and said, hey, we're trying to solve the shared mission of improving nonprofits. Could we use your data, all of your review data and private data about that with our financial data? And they said, yeah, sure, we get that. That makes a lot of sense. And together, they built a model that now is more able to predict which nonprofits are in trouble. So together, they reach their shared mission of helping nonprofits. I know that's easier said than done, but I think right now we need those examples of where it did work so that we can all sort of start to model that, because I think it's so much more powerful. We hear that's some of the question, yeah.
So for a lot of the people in this room who are smaller donors or smaller foundations, or I should say individual funders and smaller foundations, how do they relate to big data? How would you like to see them? Is there an opportunity for them to do that, given that they don't have the kind of capacity that some of our larger funders have?
Yeah. If you have a thought from the funding perspective?
Well, I think it makes collaboration even more important. I think no matter what size you are, you should start collecting data about your work from your evaluations, from your grantees. If you have to start with Excel spreadsheets, start with Excel spreadsheets. They're actually pretty powerful, but hopefully you'll get a database, because you want to be tracking information over time and being able to see trends and what kind of impact you're making over time, how many people you're reaching over time, what kind of impact are you having on them. So it's better to have a database that you can do that kind of analysis with. But I think smaller funders, it's really important to collaborate so that you can share with people who are doing common work, get bigger amounts of data so you can learn together.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, you don't have to do it all whole hog all at once. There's lots of little steps that are needed. This isn't just about putting it in a grant and saying, hey, grantee, you need to collect data. In fact, that's really hard for a lot of people. Like Lisa was saying, start by funding a database. Those are actually not that expensive. Join collectives of funders. Get some trainings. It's not just build a whole research lab within each organization, but there are lots of ways to start people on that path. And I think the best thing that you could actually do is have that attitude. I see right now the idea with funding with data is, I'm going to give you money, and you're going to give me data back, and you have to, grantee, so I can tell you're doing a good job. And that's really hard for people. It takes a lot of capacity, a lot of tech they don't have, and it kind of creates these perverse incentives, like just metrics. I'm going to give you money or wag my finger at you if you hit these. And what you want instead is a culture that says, look, I'm going to give you capacity to experiment with these things. We don't know if it's going to work or not, and that's okay. That's why we're funding this, because we're taking some small bets towards a really big payoff.
Yeah, let me just say another step on that. We've been actually working with our grantees to try to help them expand their data capacity, and we give them consulting, part of the general support that we give, they can use toward building their data. And we've seen a lot of progress just even over the last 3 years that we've been working on that, of organizations like Hillel and BBYO, Moishe House, Repair the World. They're collecting a ton of data, and our next hope is that they will all start sharing that data with each other, so we can really have a huge amount of information about the journey of young people through different stages of their life, and how can we better support them. So part of it is really just helping your grantees. You don't have to build an enormous data set, but you could, like I said, pay for a data scientist, pay for a database, help get them technical assistance so how they can do this themselves, because ultimately their impact is your impact.
Hi. Having had the opportunity to do some seeding of small, medium, and big data sets in this community, I have two observations I'd love for you to respond to. The first is, how have you found the ability, especially at Schusterman, to get over the fact that data isn't initially emotional, and for many funders, there's a desire to find a mission-aligned project, and data does not strike that chord initially. And then the second question is, recognizing that data is a capacity-building activity that takes a long time for your grantees or for yourself to build, how do we start thinking beyond a one-year grant for data to solve the problem in a couple of months, as opposed to a longer-term trajectory, which I think we recognize as part of the culture change we may be talking about?
Oh, questions.
Well, like I said, we've been on a journey ourselves. I mean, when we first started talking about data, I don't think we even understood what it meant and how we were going to use it and why we needed it so badly. And so we've been, over time, just getting more and more embracing of it, more adept at it, and more, I think, facile with using it and helping our grantees use it. So it's a process. You just have to start somewhere, even if you don't have that emotional attachment at the beginning. And in terms of, multi-year grants, I think just in general, multi-year grants are better. I think giving general support and capacity building assistance to grantees helps them use the funding for whatever they most need. So I agree with you. I think 1 year of data is not going to tell you a lot. You actually really need multi-year data, and you need multi-year help to build that data and do the analysis over time. So I'm with you on that.
To the point about the storytelling, I don't think, you're right. You look at a spreadsheet and it just doesn't, you don't feel the emotion from a spreadsheet on returns. But I saw a talk by someone, Sasha something, where he showed a graph of a number of data points and like a line going through it. And it's like, okay, here's the line. It's not very sexy, but what's this dot out here? Like, what's off the line? What is this right here? These kind of outliers. And in those outliers, when you dig in, like, therein lies the story, right, of the person who's off that line. And to your point of the quote about data is what, ourselves and our civilization. Excuse me, the story of ourselves, the story of our civilization. Like, data is people. It sounds like Soylent Green, right? It's like, data is people. Like, they're people. Each one of those data points is a person. And yeah, it's not sexy when it's written in, like, Arial font in Excel, but tell that story. Find that person. You can all have communications departments. Find some ways to do that, because I think that's the disconnect. Is it's not one or the other. And yay long-term grants. I actually wonder. I'm not a funder, and our nonprofit's pretty young. Are there models that are analogous from the past we can look at? Like, how did people fund? I would imagine we could have this talk in the 80s and be like, everyone, computers, trust us. How did the community respond then? And can we learn from that for better or for worse?
That's great. Well, I think we're out of our time here, but I want to thank you. Do you have any closing thought that you want to share?
DataKind.org. We help people pro bono handle these problems, and we love this conversation. But we hope that you find, this whole Data for Good movement wherever it is. It's everywhere. It's not just us. I hope this starts that path for all of you.
I want to actually just thank Andres and JFN for putting this on the agenda. I think it's a really important topic. We all need to get started. I also want to thank Jake. I want to thank Aideen Sachs, who has been working with both of us on this topic. And also my friend Darren, whose article really inspired me about why we need big data to have better wisdom to do our work better. So in closing, get started, start sharing, and we're just at the beginning of this journey. So looking forward to being on it with everybody. Thank you so much.